Hey friends, tonight we begin somewhere colder, wetter, and more patient in its misery than most can imagine. No central heating, no dry floors, no quiet corners without the drip of water from stone. Just the steady hiss of rain against slate, the slow trickle down the inside of a wall, and the smell of damp wool that never truly dries. This is life inside the castles of the British Isles. Forget the shining banquets and noble romances of legend. The truth is colder, rooms that never warm, corridors that funnel drafts like hidden rivers of air, and courtyards where the mud never fades, only deepens with each passing storm. Here, the enemy is not always an army at the gates, but mildew in the rushes, rust on the armor, and the kind of damp that seeps into your bones and makes itself at home. So, pull your cloak tighter. The rain's not stopping anytime soon. Waking to dripping walls. The first sound is not the call of a bird or the distant ring of a blacksmith's hammer. It is the sound of water. Plink, plink, plunk. It is a slow, methodical rhythm, a patient, quiet percussion that has woven itself into the fabric of your dreams. As you drift towards wakefulness, you realize the sound is not outside. It is in the room with you, a close and intimate companion. You open your eyes not to sunlight, but to a familiar, perpetual gray gloom that filters through the narrow arrow-slit window. The air is thick, heavy, and carries the scent of damp stone, wet wool, and something vaguely like a cave. Your chamber is not a grand tapestried room. It is a small, functional space carved out of the immense thickness of the castle wall. The walls are bare, unforgiving stone, their surfaces cool and slick to the touch. The dripping sound comes from the corner where the outer wall meets the ceiling. It is not a leak from the roof above, it is the castle itself weeping. The stone, chilled by the eternal damp of the island air, collects the small warmth of your own breath, the steam from a cup of heated wine, and conspires to turn it back into water. This condensation, this sweat, gathers on the cold stone and traces slow, dark paths down the wall until it forms a fat, trembling drop that falls to the floor, joining a small, dark puddle that never truly dries. You shift under your blanket, and the dampness makes itself known. The thick wool is not wet, not yet, but it is heavy with a clammy chill that seems to have settled deep into its fibers. It offers weight, but little true warmth. It feels as though it has absorbed the very essence of the stone walls around it. You pull it tighter around your shoulders, a futile gesture against a cold that comes from within the very structure of your home. The floor is made of uneven stone flags, covered with a thin layer of rushes for insulation, but the rushes, too, are a victim of the damp. They are limp and slightly slimy underfoot, releasing a faint, musty odor when disturbed. You know that to rise from the bed is to trade the passive dampness of your blankets for the more assertive chill of the floor. You look around the small chamber. A wooden chest holds your few possessions. A low stool sits by the wall. Everything is touched by the damp. The leather straps on the chest are stiff and prone to mildew. The wood of the stool feels perpetually cool. A fine, almost invisible layer of moisture seems to coat every surface. This is the quiet, insidious reality of living within stone. A castle is a fortress designed to keep enemies out, but it is also a trap designed to keep the damp in. It is a man-made mountain, and like any mountain, it has its own internal weather system, a climate of perpetual chill and damp that no amount of fire or blankets can ever truly defeat. You listen to the dripping, the castle's slow, steady heartbeat. It is the sound of decay,
the sound of stones surrendering, molecule by molecule, to the relentless persuasion of water. And as you lie there, summoning the will to face another day, you feel it not just in the air or in your blanket, but in your own bones. A deep, resonant chill that seems to emanate from the very foundations of the world. You do not feel rested. You feel preserved, like an artifact stored in a cool, damp cellar.
The fire that barely warms. There is a fire in the castle. You know this because you can smell it. A faint, smoky tang hangs in the air of the upper corridors, a ghostly reminder of the great hearth that burns 2 floors below in the hall. It is a colossal fireplace, a cavernous mouth of stone large enough for a man to stand inside, and it consumes logs with a ferocious appetite. Down there, in the immediate orbit of its magnificent blaze, there is warmth. Servants and men-at-arms huddled near it, turning to roast first their fronts, then their backs, their faces flushed red in the flickering orange light. The lord and his lady may have a heavy screen to shield them from drafts and capture some of the heat. For those in the hall, the fire is a real and powerful presence. But you are not in the hall. You are in your chamber, a small room high up in the stone tower, and here the fire is a distant rumor, a faint promise that is never fulfilled. Heat, you have been told, rises, but this is a slow, inefficient process, a battle between the energy of the fire and the immense, cold-absorbing mass of the stone. The stone always wins. The meager warmth that drifts up the spiral staircase is devoured by the freezing walls long before it can reach you. It is a single drop of hot water in a cold ocean. You lie in your bed, curled into a tight ball, your breath a visible cloud of white mist in the air. The cold is not a passive absence of heat. It is an active, aggressive force. It radiates from the stone walls, from the stone floor, even from the stone ceiling. You're encased in a box of solid cold. Your woolen blanket, heavy with damp, does little more than trap a thin layer of your own rapidly chilling body heat. The concept of being cozy is a fantasy. The best you can hope for is a state of manageable shivering. Sometimes, a servant might bring a brazier, a metal pan filled with glowing charcoal, to your room. This is a rare luxury and a dangerous one. The brazier offers a small, localized pocket of intense heat, but it also consumes the air and fills the room with poisonous fumes. To stay warm is to risk a slow, sleepy death from suffocation. More often, you rely on a bed warmer, a long-handled copper pan filled with hot embers from the main fire, which is passed quickly between the sheets before you get in. It creates a temporary zone of bliss, a shocking, delicious warmth against your frozen feet, but the heat is fleeting. Within an hour, the pan is cold, and the damp chill of the linens has returned, feeling even more intense by contrast.
You think of the fire in the great hall. You could almost hear the crackle of the logs, see the dance of the flames. It is the heart of the castle, but its circulation is poor. Its life-giving warmth barely reaches the extremities of the stone body. The distance between your cold room and that roaring fire is not just a matter of floors and stairs. It is a measure of your place in the castle's hierarchy. True, consistent warmth is the ultimate status symbol, a luxury reserved for the very few. For you, the fire is a metaphor. It is a symbol of a comfort that is always present, but never accessible. It is a reminder that living in a castle is not about being protected by the warmth of a home, but about being imprisoned in the cold of a fortress. You shiver, pull the damp blanket tighter, and see your own breath plume in the frigid air, a small, fleeting ghost in a room the fire will never touch.
The smell of wet rushes. The floor of your world is not made of wood or stone, but of vegetation. In a futile attempt to combat the bone-chilling cold of the stone flags, the floors of the castle are covered with a thick layer of rushes, fragrant herbs, and straw. In the first few hours after being laid, this green carpet is a minor miracle. It softens your footfalls, offers a slight cushion against the hard floor, and releases a fresh, sweet, grassy scent that briefly masks the other, less pleasant odors of the castle. It is a fleeting moment of rustic charm. But the castle is a creature of damp, and the rushes are its first victim. They absorb every bit of moisture in the air. The condensation from the walls, the spray from a rain-swept doorway, the humidity of 100 unwashed bodies. They soak up every spill, the dregs of a tipped-over mug of ale, a greasy bone dropped from the table, the contents of a chamber pot that was stumbled over in the dark. The fresh, green carpet quickly becomes a sodden, rotting mat.
With every step you take, a small puff of foul-smelling air is released. It is a complex and deeply unpleasant aroma, a rich stew of mildew, decay, stale beer, and rotting food. The sweet scent of the meadow herbs has been replaced by the sour smell of the swamp. You learn to walk lightly, to avoid disturbing the pungent spirits trapped in the floor coverings. The rushes are a world unto themselves. They are a thriving ecosystem for fleas, lice, and other unseen insects. They are a convenient repository for waste. People spit into them, toss food scraps into them, and allow their dogs to relieve themselves in them. The rushes conceal a multitude of sins, creating a kind of archaeological record of the castle's daily life. To dig through the layers would be to uncover a history of feasts, spills, and general filth. Cleaning is not a daily affair. The old soiled rushes are not swept out and replaced with any regularity. Instead, a fresh layer is simply strewn on top of the old one. This creates a stratified history of rot, a compressed, layered bog that can grow to be several inches thick. The bottom layers decompose into a black, slimy humus, a permanent part of the floor's topography.
In your small chamber, you'd try to maintain a degree of cleanliness. You might sweep the top layer of rushes near your bed, but the underlying damp and the faint, persistent smell of decay are impossible to eradicate. In the Great Hall, the situation is far worse. Here, hundreds of people and animals tramp through daily, and the floor is a public midden. The smell is a constant, oppressive presence, a background note to every conversation, every meal. You become so accustomed to it that you cease to consciously notice it, but it permeates everything. It clings to the hem of your clothes, to your hair, to the very air you breathe. When the rushes are finally, eventually changed, perhaps once a year before a major feast, it is a monumental undertaking. The entire hall is cleared, and servants with pitchforks and shovels begin the disgusting work of excavating the compacted layers of filth. The stench is overwhelming, a physical assault on the senses. The old rushes are carted out and dumped in a ditch, and for a few glorious days, the castle floors are covered with a fresh, sweet-smelling layer. But you know it is only a temporary reprieve. The damp is relentless. The spills are inevitable. The rot will return. You walk across the floor, and with each soft, squelching step, you release the castle's signature perfume, the inescapable, unforgettable smell of wet rushes.
Rats in the pantry. The castle is a city of stone, and like any city, it has its own shadow population.
a scurrying, unseen citizenry that thrives in the darkness and the filth. They are the rats. They are a constant, unwelcome, and ineradicable feature of your existence. You do not think of the castle as being infested with them. You think of it as sharing your home with them. They are your cohabitants. Their kingdom is the network of spaces that humans do not occupy. The dark, narrow passages within the thick walls, the spaces beneath the floorboards, the forgotten corners of the storerooms. But their foraging grounds are your living spaces. The pantry and the kitchen are their great cathedrals. Here they are lords of the underworld, feasting on the riches of your larder. You see the evidence of their nightly raids everywhere. A sack of precious flour with a neat, chewed hole in its side, a trail of grains leading to a crack in the wall, a wheel of cheese nibbled and burrowed into, a slab of bacon hanging from a hook with tiny, telltale teeth marks along its edge.
The cooks and the stewards wage a constant, losing war against them. They set crude wooden traps, which sometimes snap shut on a fat, unwary rodent. They keep cats, lazy, well-fed creatures that are more interested in sleeping by the fire than in serious hunting. But for every rat they catch, there are 100 more, hidden and breeding in the walls. The rat population is a tide that can be briefly held back, but never turned. But their presence is not confined to the storerooms. At night, when the castle settles into a semblance of quiet, you hear them. You lie in your bed, and you hear the faint, frantic scratching of their claws on the stone floor of your own chamber. You hear the high-pitched, chittering squeaks of a dispute over a fallen crumb. Sometimes, in the flickering light of a dying candle, you see a fleeting, dark shape dart across the floor and vanish into a shadow. The boldest of them will venture further. It is not unheard of to be woken in the night by the sensation of a small whiskered body scurrying across your blanket. It is a moment of pure, heart-stopping revulsion. You cry out, thrash about, but the creature is gone, vanished back into the darkness, leaving you with a lingering feeling of violation and filth.
You know that these are the same rats that feast on the garbage in the midden heap, the same rats that swim in the stagnant water of the moat, the same rats that nibble on the corpses in the plague pits when sickness sweeps through the countryside. They are vessels of disease, furry messengers of death. Every time you see one, you are reminded of your vulnerability, of the thin line that separates your ordered world from the chaos and contagion of the world outside. The dogs of the castle are a more boisterous enemy of the rats. A terrier, bred for the purpose, might be brought in for a rat hunt, a chaotic and bloody affair where the dog is let loose in a granary, its frantic barking mingling with the terrified squeals of its prey. It is a form of entertainment, a brief, violent release from the boredom of castle life, but it is ultimately futile. The rats always returned. They are a symbol of the castle's true nature. For all its imposing stone walls and fortified gates, it is not a hermetically sealed fortress. It is a porous, decaying structure, full of cracks and holes, open to the infiltration of the wild and unclean world. The rats are a constant, gnawing reminder that you are not the sole masters of this stone kingdom. You share your food, you share your home, and you share your nights with the silent, scurrying army in the walls.
The endless drafts. A castle is a building designed to be full of holes. This is its fundamental paradox. It is a fortress meant to be impenetrable, yet it is deliberately perforated with openings. The narrow arrow slits for the archers, the grim machicolations for dropping boiling oil, the crenellations on the battlements for the watchmen. Each of these openings, so essential for defense, is also an open invitation for the castle's most persistent and tireless enemy, the wind. Life inside the castle is a life lived in a state of perpetual draft. There is no escaping it. It is a constant, invisible river of cold air that flows through the corridors, eddies in the corners of rooms, and funnels itself down the great spiral staircases. You feel it as a constant, nagging pressure, a cold hand on the back of your neck. You try to fight it. You hang heavy woolen tapestries on the walls of the main chambers. These are not just for decoration. They are a form of insulation, a barrier to stop the stone from leaching all the warmth from the air. But the drafts simply flow around them. You stuff the arrow slits with rags or bundles of straw, but this plunges the rooms into near total darkness and only slightly lessens the flow of air. The wind is a patient, insidious foe. It will always find a way in.
The doorways are the worst offenders. The heavy oak doors are ill-fitting in their stone frames, leaving gaps at the top, bottom, and sides. Every time someone enters or leaves the great hall, a great gust of wind billows in, making the torches and candles flicker wildly and sending a wave of cold across the room. The wealthiest chambers have a second set of doors or a heavy curtain, creating a rudimentary airlock. But for most of the castle's inhabitants, the draft is a constant companion. You learn to live with it. You develop a castle hunch, a permanent stoop of the shoulders as you lean into the wind. You wear your cloak indoors as well as out. You learn to position yourself in a room based on the flow of the drafts, seeking out the rare, still pockets of air as if they were oases in a desert of wind. You watch the flames of the candles to read the invisible currents in the room, knowing that a steady flame means a moment of precious stillness. The drafts carry not just cold, but also sound and smell. The whistle and moan of the wind as it passes through the battlements is the castle's constant, mournful song. The drafts carried the stench of the latrine garderobes up from the outer walls, the smell of the smoky kitchens, and the wet dog aroma from the kennels. The air is a moving tapestry of the castle's various functions and failings. At night, the drafts seem to take on a life of their own. They make the tapestries sway and bulge, as if something is moving behind them. They cause doors to creak on their hinges. They extinguish your precious candle with a sudden targeted puff, plunging you into darkness and frustration. They are mischievous, malevolent spirits, constantly reminding you of the wild, untamed world that presses in on all sides of your stone sanctuary. Living with the endless drafts is a lesson in futility. You can block one opening, but the wind will simply find another. The castle, for all its strength and solidity, is a sieve. It is a great stone flute, and the wind is the musician, playing a constant, chilling, and inescapable tune. You wrap your cloak tighter, pull your hood lower, and learn to live in the river of cold air that is your home. The courtyard floods. The courtyard, or bailey, is the heart of the castle's daily life. It is the open space where horses are shod, where goods are unloaded, where soldiers drill, and where children play. In the rare, blessed days of sunshine, it is a bustling, dusty theater of activity. But in the British Isles, sunny days are a fleeting luxury. For most of the year, the courtyard is a shallow, stinking lake of mud and misery. The rain is a constant presence, a soft, gray curtain that seems to hang perpetually over the land. It is not always a dramatic downpour, but a persistent, soul-sapping drizzle that soaks everything and everyone. The courtyard, paved with uneven, poorly drained cobblestones, is not equipped to handle it. The water has nowhere to go. It pools in the dips and hollows, forming stagnant brown puddles that grow and merge until the entire central space is a quagmire.
This is not clean rainwater. The courtyard is also the castle's primary drainage area for all manner of filth. Runoff from the stables, with its pungent mix of horse manure and straw, flows into the center. Garbage from the kitchens, vegetable peelings, animal bones, spoiled food, is often tossed into a corner where the rain turns it into a festering, soupy mess. The contents of chamber pots are sometimes unceremoniously dumped from an upper window, adding to the vile brew. The courtyard flood is a primordial soup of mud, manure, garbage, and human waste.
To cross the courtyard is a perilous undertaking. You must pick your way carefully along the edges, seeking the higher ground, or risk sinking up to your ankles in the cold, viscous muck. The sucking sound of your boots pulling free from the mud is a constant, rhythmic punctuation to your day. The hem of your tunic or gown is perpetually stained with a dark, foul-smelling ring of filth. The smell is overwhelming, especially on the warmer, damp days. It is the thick, earthy smell of wet mud combined with the sharp tang of ammonia from the animal waste and the sweet, cloying scent of decay from the garbage. You learn to breathe shallowly, to become accustomed to a background level of stench that would make an outsider gag. The animals suffer as much as the humans. The horses stand forlornly in the mud, their hooves caked with filth. The dogs and chickens that roam the bailey are perpetually dirty, their coats and feathers matted with muck. The mud becomes a breeding ground for flies and disease, a constant, low-level threat to the health of the entire castle community.
When a heavy downpour occurs, the situation becomes critical. The slow-moving lake becomes a brown, swirling river. The lower levels of the workshops and stables that line the courtyard might flood, ruining supplies and creating even more chaos. The simple act of getting from the gatehouse to the great hall becomes a journey through a foul, treacherous marsh. There are attempts to mitigate the problem. Wooden planks might be laid down to create makeshift walkways, but these are quickly become slick with slime and sink into the mud themselves. Servants might be tasked with digging shallow drainage channels, a futile and endless task as they quickly become clogged with debris. The flooded courtyard is a perfect metaphor for the reality of castle life. From a distance, the castle is a magnificent, powerful symbol of order and strength. But at its heart, at its very center, is a chaotic, stinking, inescapable bog. It is a constant reminder that for all the grandeur of the stone walls, life within them is a daily struggle against the forces of mud, rain, and decay. Wet armor and rust. As a squire or a man-at-arms, your life is inextricably linked to a suit of metal. Your armor is your second skin, your protection in battle, and the symbol of your status and profession. It is also your greatest burden, a demanding, high-maintenance master that is in a constant losing battle with the castle's most insidious enemy, the damp. You do not store your armor in a dry, climate-controlled room. You store it in the armory, a stone-walled chamber that is often on the ground floor, where the air is thick with the chill and moisture seeping up from the earth. Or perhaps you keep it on a stand in the corner of the barracks, a crowded, drafty room you share with a dozen other soldiers. There is no escaping the damp. After a day of training in the rain-soaked courtyard or returning from a patrol through the misty hills, your armor is drenched. Every plate, every joint, every leather strap is saturated. You cannot simply take it off and forget about it. To leave it wet for even a single night is to invite disaster. The next morning you will find it transformed. The once bright, polished steel will be covered in a fine orange-red bloom, like a virulent rash. Rust. The fight against rust is the great, unglamorous, and never-ending chore of your life.
It is a battle you must fight every single day. You take the armor apart, piece by piece. The greaves, the gauntlets, the breastplate, the helmet. You lay the pieces out on a rough cloth. You take a block of abrasive sandstone and a handful of sharp sand, mixed with vinegar, or, if you're lucky, a little oil. And you begin to scour. The work is backbreaking and tedious. The sound of metal scraping on metal is a harsh, grating soundtrack to your evenings. You must rub and polish for hours, your muscles aching, your fingers raw. You must work the abrasive paste into every crevice, every rivet, every joint, to remove every last speck of the corrosive orange blight. It is a slow, painstaking process. A single spot of mist rust can weaken the metal, creating a vulnerability that could cost you your life in a real fight. The chainmail is the worst. Each tiny, interlocking ring is a potential home for rust. You must tumble the mail hauberk in a barrel of sand and vinegar for what feels like an eternity, the rhythmic, clinking roar, a familiar sound in the armory. Then you must painstakingly check it, link by link, for any remaining corrosion.
Once the rust is gone, you must protect the metal. You rub each piece down with a greasy, foul-smelling tallow or oil, a protective layer to ward off the damp. The armor is never truly clean. It is always slightly greasy, carrying the smell of oil and old metal. The leather straps, too, must be treated. If left damp, they will stiffen, crack, and eventually rot. You must rub them with saddle soap or animal fat to keep them supple and strong. This is the hidden reality behind the image of the shining knight. The gleam of his armor is not a natural state. It is the result of countless hours of grueling, repetitive, and dirty work. It is a temporary victory in a permanent war against the climate. The true enemy is not the dragon or the rival army. It is the gentle, persistent, all-pervading damp of the British Isles, an enemy that never sleeps and never surrenders. The smell of the kennels. The hunt is one of the few true pleasures of noble life, a thrilling escape from the boredom and confinement of the castle walls. And the soul of the hunt is the dogs. The castle kennels are home to a large, boisterous, and deeply cherished pack of hounds, greyhounds for speed, mastiffs for power, and specialized scent hounds for tracking. The Lord values his best dogs more than many of his men. They are coddled, well-fed, and essential to his status and his recreation. They are also the source of one of the castle's most powerful and pervasive smells. The kennels themselves are usually located near the stables, a dedicated stone building with a straw-covered floor. But the dogs are not always confined there. They are a constant presence within the castle itself, especially after a hunt. They come back from the chase muddy, exhilarated, and soaked to the skin. They are brought into the lower levels of the great hall, a steaming, panting, jostling pack. The smell they bring with them is overwhelming. It is the primal, musky scent of wet dog, magnified 30 or 40 times over. It is a thick, animal odor that seems to coat the back of your throat. As they dry by the heat of the great hall's fire, they release clouds of steam, each one carrying this potent aroma, which then circulates through the drafty hall and up into the rest of the castle. It is a smell that announces its presence with authority and lingers for days, long after the dogs themselves have been returned to their kennels. This is not the only scent they contribute. The kennels themselves are a source of a constant, powerful stench. The straw on the floor is perpetually soiled with dog waste, and while it is changed with some regularity, the underlying stone and earth have absorbed the smell of years of canine occupation. It is a sharp ammoniac odor that, on a damp day with the wind in the right direction, can be detected from halfway across the courtyard. The dogs themselves are not particularly clean. They roll in mud, in carrion, in things you would rather not think about. They are washed infrequently.
They carry the smells of the wild world into the enclosed space of the castle. Their breath, after a meal of raw meat and offal from the hunt's kill, is a foul thing.
Yet you tolerate it. The dogs are a privileged class. They are allowed to roam the great hall during meals, begging for scraps, their wet noses nudging your hand. They sleep in piles by the hearth, their collective snoring and occasional sleep yips a familiar part of the night's soundscape. To complain about the smell of the dogs would be to show a shocking lack of understanding of the Lord's priorities. The hunt is paramount, and the dogs are its living embodiment. So, you learn to live with the smell. It becomes part of the complex olfactory tapestry of the castle, blending with the wood smoke, the damp stone, the rotting rushes, and the unwashed humanity. It is the scent of nobility's favorite pastime. It is the price of the thrill of the chase. It is the powerful, unavoidable, and deeply animal smell of the kennels.
The mold on the bread. Bread is the staff of life. It is the fundamental foodstuff that sustains everyone in the castle, from the lord and his solar to the lowest kitchen scullion. Huge quantities of it are baked in the castle's great ovens, a communal enterprise that fills the bailey with the rare, delicious scent of baking for a day. The result is not soft white loaves, but dense, heavy rounds of dark bread made from rye, barley, or a mix of grains called maslin. This bread is designed to last, but in the damp castle environment, its greatest enemy is the mold. The bread is stored in the pantry or larder, a stone-walled room that is, like the rest of the castle, cool and perpetually damp. The loaves are stacked on wooden shelves, but the air around them is thick with moisture and hungry mold spores. There is no such thing as truly dry storage. The battle against mold is a constant, and usually losing one.
Within a few days of being baked, you begin to see the first signs. A faint, white, dusty bloom appears on the thick, dark crust. This is followed by small, distinct patches of green or black, like tiny, sinister gardens. Given another day, these patches will grow and merge, covering the loaf in a fuzzy, velvety carpet. The smell changes too, from the wholesome scent of baked grain to a sharp, musty, and unpleasant odor of decay. This would be a cause for disposal in a modern kitchen. In a medieval castle, it is a minor inconvenience. Food is too precious, and the labor required to produce it too great to simply throw it away. The mold is not seen as a poison, but as a nuisance to be dealt with. When you are served your portion of bread, you inspect it. If the mold is light, you might just ignore it. If it is more established, you take your knife and carefully scrape it off. You shave away the green and black fuzz, trying to remove as little of the precious bread underneath as possible. You are left with a loaf that is pockmarked and discolored, but deemed edible.
The taste is affected, of course. The bread has a faint, sharp off flavor, a tang of mildew that you learn to associate with your daily meal. Sometimes, if the bread is particularly far gone, it is revived by being toasted over the fire, the heat killing the surface mold and the smoky flavor helping to mask the taste of decay. Or it might be soaked in ale or used as a trencher, a thick flat slab of stale bread that serves as a plate for your meat and stew. You eat the food off the top, and then, if you are still hungry, you eat the sauce-soaked, mold-scraped trencher itself. Eating moldy bread is a gamble. Sometimes it is harmless. Other times it can lead to stomach cramps, sickness, or even the terrifying condition known as St. Anthony's fire, a form of ergot poisoning from a fungus that grows on rye, which causes hallucinations, seizures, and a burning gangrene in the limbs. But this is a risk you take. The alternative is hunger, which is a more certain and immediate threat.
So, you scrape the mold off your bread and you eat it. It is a small, daily act of compromise, a testament to the fact that in this life, nothing is perfect, nothing is pure, and survival often means ingesting a little bit of decay. The green fuzz on the daily loaf is a constant reminder that the forces of rot are always at work, even on the very staff of your life.
The laundry never dries. The concept of laundry day implies a cycle with a beginning and an end. It implies a journey from dirty to clean and from wet to dry. In a medieval castle, this cycle is permanently broken. The laundry exists in a perpetual state of being not quite clean and never quite dry. Washing clothes is a monumental chore. It is done not in a dedicated room with hot water, but in the courtyard or by a nearby stream. Large wooden tubs are filled with cold water, to which is added harsh, lye-based soap, and sometimes wood ash or stale urine to act as a bleaching agent. The clothes, heavy woolen tunics, linen undergarments, thick blankets, are thrown in and pounded with wooden bats or trampled underfoot. It is back-breaking, cold, and unpleasant work, performed by laundry women whose hands are raw and chapped from the constant immersion in the caustic water. The goal is not to achieve a state of pristine cleanliness, but to remove the worst of the dirt and sweat. The clothes emerge from this process cleaner, but not clean. They are stiff with soap residue and carry the faint, sharp smell of the lye.
But the real challenge is not the washing, it is the drying. There is no dedicated drying space, no tumble dryer, no warm, dry air. There is only the damp, cool atmosphere of the British Isles. On a rare, sunny and windy day, the clothes might be hung on lines in the courtyard or spread over bushes, and they might, if you are very lucky, actually dry. But such days are few and far between. For most of the year, the laundry must be dried indoors. And the only indoor space large enough to accommodate it is the Great Hall. Long wooden poles are suspended from the high, smoky rafters, and the wet, heavy garments are hung from them, dripping slowly onto the rush-covered floor below. The Great Hall is transformed into a vast, damp and gloomy laundry room. The hanging clothes block the already limited light from the high windows. They fill the air with a chilly, damp miasma. The smell of the wet wool and the lye soap mingles unpleasantly with the ever-present smells of wood smoke, food, and unwashed bodies.
And the clothes never truly dry. They just hang there limply for days on end, moving from a state of being wet to a state of being permanently damp. The fire in the great hearth is too far away to have any real effect. After 2 or 3 days, the clothes are taken down. They feel cool and clammy to the touch, and they carry the faint, musty smell of mildew that has already begun to set in. This is as dry as they are going to get. You put on a clean shirt, and it feels cold and damp against your skin, a deeply unpleasant sensation that sends a shiver down your spine. Your clothes are never crisp and fresh. They are always slightly limp, slightly smelly, slightly damp. You become accustomed to this feeling, this state of being perpetually encased in textiles that are not quite dry. The laundry hanging in the great hall is a symbol of the castle's eternal, losing battle against the damp. It is a constant, visible reminder that in this world there is no true dryness, no true cleanliness. There is only a cycle of filth, a brief, cold washing, and a long, slow return to a state of musty
damp decay.
Rushlights that sputter. The darkness inside a castle is a physical presence. It is a thick, profound blackness, deeper and more absolute than the darkness of the open countryside. The stone walls, which repel enemies, also imprison the night. To combat this darkness, you have fire. But the fire of a torch or a candle is a small, fragile, and deeply flawed weapon against such a powerful foe. For most of the castle's inhabitants, the primary source of light after sunset is the rushlight. It is the cheapest and most common form of illumination, and it is a masterpiece of frugal ingenuity. You make them yourself. You gather the long, straight stems of the rush plant from a nearby marsh. You peel away the outer layer, leaving a single, thin strip of green skin to support the soft, white pith inside. Then you dip this long, fragile wick into a pan of hot, melted animal fat, the foul-smelling grease skimmed from the top of the cooking pot. You let it cool, and you have a rushlight.
To use it, you clip it into a special holder, a simple iron stand with a pincer-like grip. When lit, it does not produce a steady, clean flame like a modern candle. It sputters and hisses, the fat melting and dripping. It gives off a weak, flickering yellow-orange light that seems to accentuate the shadows more than it dispels them. The light is just enough to allow you to see the shape of the furniture in your room, to avoid stumbling over a stool, but not enough to read or to perform any detailed work. To live by rushlight is to live in a world of vague, shifting shapes and deep, impenetrable shadows. The rushlight is also a source of constant, greasy smoke. A thin, black plume rises from the burning pith, carrying the smell of burning fat throughout the room. It creates a haze in the air that stings your eyes and tickles the back of your throat. Over time, this smoke leaves a fine, black, greasy layer of soot on the walls and ceiling, a permanent stain that marks the places where light has been. And the light is brief. A single rushlight might burn for 15 or 20 minutes before it gutters and dies. Life after dark is measured in rushlights. A task is 2 rushlights long. You must have a supply of them ready, and the process of lighting a new one from the dying stub of the old one is a familiar and often frustrating ritual.
Torches are used in the more public spaces, like the Great Hall and the main corridors. These are simply thick pieces of wood wrapped in oil-soaked rags. They provide a much brighter, more dramatic light, but they are also far smokier and dirtier. The walls near the torch sconces are permanently blackened, and the air in the hall is thick with a choking, acrid smoke. Beeswax candles are the ultimate luxury. They burn with a clear, steady, sweet-smelling flame. They produce very little smoke. They are a clean and beautiful source of light. They are also astronomically expensive. They are reserved for the Lord's private chambers, for the chapel altar, and for the most important of feasts. For you, the light of a beeswax candle is a rare and magical sight, a symbol of a world of wealth and purity that is far removed from your own smoky, sputtering existence. To live by torchlight and rushlight is to accept that darkness is the natural state of the world, and light is a temporary, costly, and imperfect intrusion. It is to live in a world of shadows, of smoke, of stinging eyes, and of a darkness that is never truly defeated, only held at bay for a few flickering, greasy minutes at a time.
The Servant's Night. The castle is a machine that requires a huge amount of human fuel to keep it running. While the Lord and his family occupy the upper chambers, the vast majority of the castle's population, the cooks, the scullions, the grooms, the laundrywomen, the men-at-arms, live and sleep below stairs. Their night is a very different experience from that of their masters, a descent into a world of crowded, comfortless, and vermin-infested darkness. There are no private chambers for the servants. They sleep communally, often in the same spaces where they work. The kitchen staff might sleep on straw pallets on the floor of the warm, smoky kitchen, amidst the lingering smells of the day's cooking. The stable hands might have a hayloft above the horses, the sounds and smells of the animals a constant presence throughout the night.
Most often, they sleep in dedicated barracks or dormitories, large stone-walled rooms on the ground floor or in the less desirable parts of the castle. These rooms are brutally functional. There are no tapestries, no furniture besides a few rough benches. The floor is either bare stone or earth, covered with a thin, flea-infested layer of straw. The only source of heat, if any, is the collective body heat of the occupants. The sleeping arrangements are simple. You are assigned a space on the floor. You might have a thin, lumpy mattress filled with straw, or you might simply have a pile of loose straw and a single coarse woolen blanket. You sleep fully clothed, for warmth and for modesty. The room is packed tight with bodies, a sea of snoring, coughing, and restless sleepers. The air is thick and stale, heavy with the smell of sweat, unwashed bodies, and damp wool. Privacy is a concept that does not exist. You are in a constant state of public living. Your sleep is broken, not just by your own discomfort, but by the discomfort of others. A man having a nightmare cries out. A woman coughs, a dry, racking sound that echoes in the stone room. Someone gets up to relieve themselves in the corner bucket, stumbling over sleeping bodies in the dark.
And then there are the vermin. These lower rooms are the heartland of the castle's rat and mouse population. As soon as the room falls into silence, you can hear them. The frantic scratching in the walls, the rustle of straw as they forage for fallen crumbs, the bold skittering across the open floor. The fear of a rat running across your face as you sleep is a very real and constant one. The straw is also alive with fleas, which leave you with a constellation of itchy red bites by morning. There are no rushlights here. When the last torch in the corridor is extinguished, the darkness is absolute. The servant's night is a world of sound and smell and touch, not of sight. You navigate by memory, by the feel of the cold stone wall, by the sound of a neighbor's breathing. It is a world away from the relative comfort of the Lord Solar. While the lady of the castle might sleep in a curtained bed protected from drafts, her servants are piled together like livestock, seeking a basic animal warmth from each other. Their sleep is not a peaceful respite, but a brief, troubled, and often interrupted period of unconsciousness before the grueling work of the next day begins long before dawn. It is a nightly reminder of their place in the rigid hierarchy of the castle, a life lived at the bottom, in the dark, cold, and crowded foundations of the great stone fortress. The Chapel in the Fog. Faith is the central pillar of the medieval world, and the chapel is the spiritual heart of the castle. It is often one of the first parts of the castle to be built, a space dedicated to the glory of God and the salvation of the Lord's soul. It is a place of stone arches, perhaps a stained glass window if the Lord is wealthy, and a carved stone altar. It is designed to inspire awe and reverence, but on a typical morning, it is also one of the coldest and most miserable places in the entire fortress. Morning prayers, or matins, are held before dawn. You are summoned from your bed by the tolling of a small bell and make your way through the dark, cold corridors to the chapel. The air inside is even colder than in the rest of the castle. The high stone ceiling and large open space make it impossible to heat. There is no hearth, only the faint symbolic warmth of a few beeswax candles on the altar. The chapel seems to be filled with a thick,
White fog. It is the collective breath of the assembled congregation, the Lord's family, the knights, the senior servants, condensing in the frigid air. The room is a swirling sea of human mist, each person contributing their own small cloud to the atmosphere. Your own breath plumes before your face, mingling with the fog.
You kneel on the cold, unforgiving stone floor. There are no pews or chairs. The cold seeps up through the thin leather of your shoes, through the wool of your tunic, and settles deep into your bones. Your knees ache. You shiver, not just from the cold, but from the damp that seems to emanate from the very stones themselves. The priest, his own breath misting as he speaks, begins the Latin Mass. His voice echoes strangely in the cold, cavernous space. You do not understand the words, but the familiar, monotonous chant is a kind of comfort. The candles on the altar are the only source of light. Their flames are not steady. They bend and dance in the constant, invisible drafts that flow through the chapel from the ill-fitting door and the unglazed windows. The flickering light makes the shadows of the stone pillars seem to shift and move, as if the chapel itself is alive and breathing. You try to focus on your prayers, on the state of your soul, but your mind is constantly drawn back to the physical reality of your discomfort. Your feet are numb. Your back aches. A shiver runs down your spine. You can see the goosebumps on your neighbor's arms. The spiritual experience is in a constant battle with the physical misery.
The smell of the chapel is one of cold stone, damp, and the sweet, cloying scent of incense that the priest burns in a swinging censer. The incense is meant to purify the air and lift the prayers to heaven, but it struggles to overcome the fundamental odor of a cold, wet stone box. When the service is finally over, you rise stiffly, your joints protesting. To step out of the chapel and back into the main part of the castle is a relief. Even the drafty, smoky great hall feels warm and welcoming by comparison. The morning prayers are a duty, a spiritual obligation, but they are also a physical ordeal. They are a daily reminder that even in the house of God, there is no escape from the bone-chilling, all-pervasive cold of the castle.
The Watchman's Rounds. High above the relative shelter of the courtyard and the great hall, there is another world, the battlements. This is the castle's jagged crown, the wind-swept, rain-lashed walkways that form the fortress's first line of defense. And to be a watchman is to be condemned to inhabit this world, to exist in a state of perpetual exposure to the raw, untamed elements. Your shift begins in the dead of night. You make your way up the tight, winding spiral staircase of the gatehouse tower, emerging onto the stone walkway. The change in atmosphere is immediate and violent. The wind hits you like a physical blow, tearing at your cloak, whipping your hair across your face, and driving the cold deep into your body. There is no shelter here, no escape. You are on the roof of the world, and the wind is its undisputed king. Your job is to pace. You walk a slow, repetitive circuit along the narrow walkway from one corner tower to the next. The stone beneath your feet is slick with rain, or, in the deepest winter, a treacherous film of ice. You must place each foot carefully, your hand often resting on the cold, rough stone of the parapet for balance. A misstep could send you plunging into the darkness of the courtyard below.
Your world is one of sound and shadow. The primary sound is the eternal moan and shriek of the wind as it whips through the crenellations. It is a lonely, desolate sound that seems to get inside your head, eroding your thoughts. You listen for other sounds, the snap of a twig in the woods beyond the castle walls, the distant bark of a fox, anything that might signal an approaching threat. But mostly, there is only the wind. Your vision is limited. On a clear, moonlit night, you can see the landscape laid out below, a silvery, monochrome map. But such nights are rare. More often, you're shrouded in darkness, in mist, in driving rain or snow. Your world shrinks to a few feet of stone walkway, the faint glimmer of a lantern your only guide. Your eyes sting from the constant wind, and you find yourself peering into a darkness that seems to press in on you. The cold is a constant physical assault. It is a wet, penetrating cold carried on the damp sea air. Your thick woolen cloak, which feels so heavy and warm indoors, is quickly saturated. The dampness seeps through, chilling you to the bone. Your hands, gripping a spear or a crossbow, become numb and useless claws. Your feet feel like blocks of ice. The only way to generate any warmth is to keep moving, to continue your endless circular pacing.
Boredom is your other great enemy. For hours on end, nothing happens. The world is dark, cold, and empty. You are utterly alone. You fight to stay awake, to remain vigilant. You sing to yourself. You count the stones in the wall. You recite prayers. Anything to keep your mind from succumbing to the hypnotic rhythm of the wind and the cold, sodden lethargy. You are the castle's eyes and ears. You are the lonely sentinel, the guardian against the dangers of the night. But your real battle is not against an invading army. It is against the elements. It is a struggle against the wind, the rain, the cold, and the crushing, soul-deep loneliness of the watch. You pace your circle of stone, a solitary figure against the vast, dark sky, waiting for the first gray hint of dawn that will signal the end of your long, cold vigil.
Shadows in the corners. The castle at night is a kingdom of shadows. The light from the sputtering rushlights and the smoky torches is weak and unreliable, a small, fragile rebellion against an overwhelming darkness. This light does not illuminate the world, it transforms it. It creates a shifting, uncertain landscape of deep shadows and flickering, distorted shapes. To live in the castle at night is to live in a world where your own eyes cannot be trusted. You walk down a corridor, a single torch in your hand. The flame casts your own shadow as a monstrous, elongated giant that dances and leaps on the stone walls behind you. The rough, uneven surface of the stone breaks the light, creating 1,000 small pockets of absolute blackness. The corridor ahead of you is not an empty space, but a cavern filled with moving, writhing darkness.
Every corner of every room holds a deep, impenetrable pool of shadow. You know, rationally, that these corners are empty, but in the wavering, unreliable light, your mind begins to play tricks on you. A pile of discarded sacks in a corner becomes a huddled, lurking figure. A tapestry, gently swaying in an unseen draft, seems to writhe with a life of its own. Your tired, smoke-stung eyes begin to see movement where there is none. The castle is full of sounds that conspire with the shadows to create a sense of unease. The drip of water from a damp ceiling, the distant mournful howl of the wind, the sudden frantic scratching of a rat within the walls. Each sound seems to emanate from the darkest corners, giving the shadows a voice. You are not a superstitious person by nature. You do not truly believe in the ghosts and goblins that the servants whisper about. You know that the moving shadow is just the play of the flickering flame. You know that the creak is just the settling of an old wooden beam. But knowledge is a weak defense against the primal, instinctual fear of the dark. The castle itself, with its immense age, its history of violence and death, and its labyrinthine, shadowy spaces, seems to encourage these fears.
You go to your chamber, and the shadows come with you. Your single rushlight casts a small, trembling circle of light. Beyond this circle, the corners of the room are lost in blackness. The wooden chest against the wall looks like a coffin in the gloom. The clothes hanging from a peg take on a vaguely human shape. You lie in your bed, and the last of the light gutters and dies, plunging you into absolute darkness. Now you are truly at the mercy of your own imagination. Every creak of the floorboards above, every rustle of the straw beneath you is magnified, interpreted by your weary mind as a sign of some unseen presence. This is the psychological reality of life by torchlight. It is a life of constant, low-level uncertainty. Your primary sense, your sight, is compromised. The world is no longer a clear, stable, and predictable place. It is a shifting, ambiguous, and often menacing stage play of light and shadow. You are never entirely sure what is real and what is a trick of the light. The shadows in the corners are not ghosts, but they are a constant, unsettling reminder of the power of the darkness and the unreliability of your own perceptions.
The Great Hall's smoke. The Great Hall is the castle's stage. It is here that justice is dispensed, that oaths of fealty are sworn, and, most importantly, that feasts are held. A feast is a rare and welcome explosion of abundance and chaos in a life that is otherwise defined by scarcity and routine. It is a spectacle of power, a demonstration of the Lord's wealth and generosity. It is also an overwhelming assault on the senses, and the most dominant sensation of all is the smoke. The heart of the feast is the roasting fire. In the center of the Great Hall, or against a side wall, is a massive open hearth. There is no proper chimney, only a louvered opening or lantern in the high roof directly above it. This is a hopelessly inefficient system for ventilation. On the hearth, whole animals, a pig, a sheep, even an ox, are roasted on spits turned by weary kitchen boys. The fire is immense, a roaring bonfire that consumes huge quantities of wood, and it produces a prodigious amount of smoke.
The smoke does not rise neatly and exit through the hole in the roof. It is a wild, unruly thing. It billows out into the hole, filling the vast, high, rafted space with a thick, gray, acrid haze. It curls and eddies in the drafts, creating a permanent, smoky fog that hangs in the upper reaches of the hole, obscuring the ceiling in a perpetual gloom. To be a guest at the feast is to be slowly smoked like a piece of meat. You sit at the long trestle tables, and the smoke stings your eyes, making them water. It catches in the back of your throat, inducing a constant rasping cough. The air is thick with it, a tangible, breathable substance. The smoke is not just wood smoke. It is infused with the smell of the roasting meat, a rich, greasy, and overpowering aroma. It carries the microscopic particles of fat that spit and sizzle from the turning carcass. These particles settle on everything and everyone. They coat the tapestries on the walls, leaving them with a dark, greasy sheen. They settle on the wooden tables, on your clothes, and in your hair.
When you leave the feast and return to the cold quiet of your chamber, you take the smoke with you. Your hair and your woolen tunic are deeply infused with the smell of roasted meat and wood smoke. It is a smell that will cling to you for days, a persistent, greasy reminder of the night's festivities. You fall asleep with the phantom scent of the feast in your nostrils. The Great Hall itself is permanently seasoned by this smoke. The high, dark rafters are coated with a thick, black, sticky layer of soot, the accumulated residue of generations of feasts. This soot, when combined with the ever-present damp, can sometimes drip down onto the unfortunate guests below, a black, greasy rain of old smoke. The feast is a joyous occasion, a time of plenty and celebration, but it is a joy experienced through a haze of physical discomfort. It is a world viewed through stinging, watery eyes. It is a celebration where the air itself is thick enough to taste. The smoke is the price of the spectacle, the inescapable atmospheric cost of the magnificent roasting fire.
Ale sour in the barrel. In a world where clean drinking water is a dangerous gamble, ale is not a luxury, it is a necessity. It is the safe, calorie-rich, and ubiquitous beverage that fuels the castle from morning until night. Huge quantities of it are brewed on site, a weak, cloudy, and nutritious drink known as small beer. It is stored in massive wooden barrels in the castle's cellars, or buttery. And in the cool, damp environment of the castle, the ale is in a constant battle against time and bacteria. The castle cellar is not a climate-controlled, sterile environment. It is a cool, dark, stone-walled room, often with an earthen floor. The air is perpetually damp, and the barrels themselves are often slick with moisture. This is the perfect breeding ground for the wild yeasts and bacteria that can turn a good brew into a sour, undrinkable mess.
When a barrel is first tapped, the ale is at its best. It is cloudy and yeasty, with a fresh, slightly sweet taste of malted barley. It is a nourishing and comforting drink. But it has a short lifespan. As the days go by, and as air is introduced into the barrel with each serving, the invisible enemies begin their work. Acetobacter, the same bacteria that turns wine into vinegar, begins to consume the alcohol and convert it into acetic acid. You notice the change gradually. The ale begins to lose its sweetness and develop a slight, sharp, acidic tang. At first, it is just a background note, a hint of sourness on the finish. But as the days turn into a week, the sourness becomes more pronounced. The ale becomes tart, vinegary, and distinctly unpleasant to drink. But you drink it anyway. Ale, even sour ale, is a significant investment of grain and labor. To throw it away would be an unthinkable waste, and the alternative is often worse. The water from the well might be contaminated, and the water from the river is certainly full of human and animal waste. Sour ale is a safer bet than dysentery.
So you learn to tolerate it. You drink the souring ale with your meals, your face wrinkling slightly at the sharp, acidic taste. It is no longer a pleasure, but a functional necessity. The scullions and the lowest servants often get the dregs of the barrel, an ale that is closer to vinegar than beer, a harsh and punishing drink. Sometimes the sour ale is mixed with herbs or spices in an attempt to mask the flavor, or it might be blended with a newer, fresher batch to make it more palatable. But the underlying sourness is hard to hide. The constant presence of sour ale is a testament to the challenges of food preservation in this era. without pasteurization, without sterile equipment, without refrigeration. Every barrel of ale is a race against the inevitable process of decay. It is a race that is often lost. The sour tang of your daily drink is a constant reminder that you live in a world where everything, the bread, the meat, the ale, is in a constant, slow, and losing battle against the invisible forces of rot.
Sickness that spreads in silence. The castle, with its thick stone walls, feels like a fortress against the dangers of the outside world. But it is a fortress with a fatal flaw. It is the perfect incubator for sickness. The combination of cold, damp, crowding, poor sanitation, and malnutrition creates an ideal environment for disease to take hold and spread with silent, devastating efficiency. It often begins with a cough. In the damp, drafty corridors and chambers, respiratory illnesses are a constant feature of life, especially in winter. A simple cold can quickly turn into something more serious: bronchitis, pneumonia, what is known as lung fever. You hear the coughing first in one corner of the barracks, then in another. The airborne germs, trapped within the enclosed stone walls, pass easily from one person to another in the stale, shared air. The sickness spreads in silence and shadow. There is no understanding of germ theory. Illness is attributed to a variety of causes: a misalignment of the body's humors, a punishment from God for some hidden sin, or bad air, a miasma rising from the damp earth or the rotting filth. People do not isolate themselves when they fall ill. They huddle together for warmth, sharing blankets, sharing drinking cups, and sharing the very air they breathe, creating a perfect chain of transmission.
A cough turns into a fever. The victim retreats to their straw pallet, shivering and sweating, their body racked with aches. There is little in the way of effective medical care. The castle may have a physician or a wise woman who can offer herbal remedies, a willow bark tea for the fever, a horehound syrup for the cough. These may provide some symptomatic relief, but they cannot cure the underlying infection. The primary treatment is prayer. The priest is summoned to the bedside to offer last rites, often a sign that hope has been abandoned. The fever ends quietly in the night. One morning, a person who was coughing yesterday is simply gone. Their body is quickly and quietly removed, wrapped in a shroud, and taken for a hasty burial. There is a desire to move on quickly, a fear of dwelling on the death, as if the sickness itself might be encouraged by too much attention. But a quiet fear spreads through the community. Who will be next?
The lack of sanitation is a major contributor. The garderobes or latrines are simple chutes that empty down the outside of the castle wall, often into the moat. The water supply from the well can be easily contaminated. The rats and fleas that infest the castle are vectors for diseases like the bubonic plague. A single sick person can trigger a chain reaction that can decimate the castle's population. You live with a constant, low-level fear of sickness. You listen to your own body, noting every ache, every sniffle with a sense of dread. You watch your family and your neighbors, looking for the telltale signs of illness. When sickness comes, it is a quiet, creeping terror. It highlights the profound vulnerability of your existence. For all the strength of the castle's stone walls, they offer no protection at all against the invisible enemies that breed in the cold, the damp, and the darkness.
The stale air of winter. In summer, the castle breathes. The great doors of the hall are thrown open to the courtyard. The wooden shutters are removed from the windows.
A breeze, however feeble, is allowed to circulate, flushing out the worst of the smoke and the smells. The air is still not fresh, but it is moving. In winter, the castle holds its breath. As the cold winds and driving rains of autumn arrive, the castle seals itself up. The great doors are kept shut and barred. The shutters are closed and latched. Any crack or opening that might admit a draft is stuffed with rags or straw. The goal is to trap every precious molecule of warmth, to create a fortress not just against armies, but against the cold itself. But in trapping the heat, you also trap the air. The air inside the castle grows heavy, thick, and stale. It is a finite resource, breathed and rebreathed by the dozens or even hundreds of people and animals who live within the walls. The oxygen is slowly consumed, replaced by the carbon dioxide of exhalation. The atmosphere becomes oppressive, soporific, and fundamentally unhealthy.
This stale air is a rich and complex soup of smells. The dominant note is wood smoke, a constant, acrid presence from the hearths that are kept burning day and night. This is mixed with the smell of unwashed bodies, the damp wool of their clothes, and the sour scent of their breath. Added to this are the fumes from the sputtering rushlights and torches, the smells of cooking from the kitchen, the animal odors from the dogs by the fire, and the underlying musty scent of damp stone and rotting rushes. To be inside the castle in winter is to be permanently immersed in this thick human fug. You become so accustomed to it that you no longer notice its individual components. It is simply the air, but you feel its effects. You may suffer from frequent headaches. Your lungs may feel heavy, and a dry, persistent cough may develop from the constant irritation of the smoke. A sense of lethargy and torpor can settle over the castle's inhabitants, a direct result of the poor air quality.
The lack of ventilation has more serious consequences. The stale air is the perfect medium for the transmission of airborne diseases. A single cough can hang in the stagnant air for minutes, its invisible payload of germs waiting to be inhaled by the next person who passes by. The communal sleeping areas are particularly dangerous, with dozens of people breathing the same enclosed air for hours on end. There are moments when you must venture outside, into the biting cold of the courtyard. The shock of the fresh, clean, cold air is a revelation. For a few moments, you can breathe deeply, clearing your head and your lungs. It is a brief, bracing reminder of what clean air feels like, and it makes the return to the thick, stale atmosphere of the interior even more unpleasant. The stale air of the sealed winter castle is a necessary evil. It is the price you pay for warmth. It is a choice between freezing in the fresh air or slowly suffocating in the warm, stale air. And every day, the choice is made to shut the doors, to block the windows, and to huddle together in the thick, heavy, shared breath of your stone-walled winter prison. Rats at the feast. The great hall during a feast is a scene of carefully constructed order and hierarchy. The lord and his most honored guests sit at the high table on a raised dais, looking down on the lesser nobles and knights at the long trestle tables below. The servants move with a practiced, deferential rhythm, bringing platters of food and refilling goblets. It is a performance of power and social order. But beneath the surface, under the tables and in the shadows, a second, more chaotic feast is taking place. The floor of the hall is covered in rushes, and this layer of vegetation is a paradise for the castle's rats. During the feast, a constant shower of food descends from the tables above. A greasy bone, gnawed clean, is tossed to the floor for the dogs. A chunk of bread is dropped. A splash of ale is spilled. For the rats, this is a windfall, a banquet laid out just for them. They are bold. Years of cohabitation with humans have taught them that the chaos and noise of a feast provide the perfect cover for their activities. As the evening wears on and the humans become more preoccupied with their own eating, drinking, and conversation, the rats grow braver. You were sitting at a lower table, tearing a piece of meat from a joint with your knife. Out of the corner of your eye, you see a flicker of movement in the rushes near your feet. It is a rat, its sleek, dark body moving with a twitching, nervous energy. It sniffs the air, its whiskers trembling, its small black eyes gleaming in the torchlight. It darts forward, snatches a fallen piece of gristle, and vanishes back into the shadows. A few moments later you see another, and then another. They are a silent, scurrying army, operating in the underworld beneath the feast. The dogs that roam the hall, their bellies already full of scraps tossed from the table, are a lazy and ineffective deterrent. They might snap at a particularly bold rat, but they lack the focused predatory instinct to make a real difference.
The guests at the high table are largely oblivious to this second feast. They are elevated above it, both literally and figuratively. But for those at the lower tables, the presence of the rats is a constant, unsettling reality. You feel a shiver of revulsion as a rat scurries over your foot in its haste to grab a prize. You try to ignore it, to focus on your own food, on the conversation around you. But the knowledge that you are sharing your meal with a swarm of vermin is a difficult one to shake. The rats are a stark reminder of the true nature of the castle. For all the pomp and ceremony of the feast, for all the displays of wealth and power, you are still living in a place that is fundamentally unclean. The line between the civilized world of the high table and the scurrying, scavenging world of the rushes is a very thin one. The rat at your feet is a symbol of the decay, the filth, and the untamed nature that the stone walls can never truly keep out. The feast may be a celebration of order, but the rats are a constant, gnawing reminder of the chaos that is always lurking just beneath the surface. The echo of empty rooms. A castle is vast. From the outside, it appears as a solid, monolithic structure, but inside, it is a labyrinth, a honeycomb of rooms, corridors, and staircases. And the most striking thing about many of these spaces is their emptiness. The castle is not a cozy, fully occupied home. It is a largely empty fortress, and its dominant sound is the echo. The lord's family and their immediate retinue occupy a relatively small portion of the castle. The great hall, the solar, and a few private chambers in the main keep. The servants are crowded into the lower levels, but vast sections of the castle may be completely unused for months or even years at a time. The guest chambers in a secondary tower, the upper floors of the gatehouse, the cavernous undercrofts beneath the hall. These are spaces that are kept in a state of readiness, but are rarely inhabited. To walk through these parts of the castle is to walk through a ghost town. Your footsteps on the stone floor are the only sound, and they echo unnervingly in the stillness. Each step is answered by a hollow, ghostly repetition from the empty space ahead. The sound of your own breathing seems unnaturally loud. A cough or a sneeze becomes a percussive event, a sound that rattles around the empty room before slowly fading into silence. The air in these rooms is cold, still, and smells of dust, time, and neglect. The light is dim, filtering through arrow slits that are often partially blocked by cobwebs or the nests of birds. The walls are bare stone, slick with a fine film of damp. The floors are dusty, scattered with fallen bits of mortar, bird droppings, and the skeletal remains of insects. You might be sent to one of these empty rooms on an errand, to fetch a stored piece of furniture,
to check the condition of the roof timbers. The experience is always an eerie one. You feel like an intruder, a trespasser in a place that has been given over to silence and decay. The sheer, oppressive weight of the empty stone around you is a palpable thing.
The echo plays tricks on your mind. A sound from a distant part of the castle, the clang of a hammer in the blacksmith forge, the shout of a soldier in the courtyard is carried and distorted by the empty corridors, arriving as a strange, disembodied moan. It is easy to imagine that the castle is haunted, that the echoes are the voices of its past inhabitants trapped forever in the stone. This emptiness is a reflection of the castle's primary purpose. It is not designed for comfort or for efficient use of space. It is designed for defense. The empty rooms and long echoing corridors are part of its defensive strategy. They are spaces to be filled with soldiers in the event of a siege. They are buffer zones, kill zones, strategic voids. But a siege rarely comes. And so, for most of its life, the castle is a place of profound, echoing emptiness. It is a house that is far too large for its inhabitants. The constant echo is a reminder of this fact. It is the sound of absence, the sound of space waiting to be filled. It is the lonely, hollow voice of the castle itself.
Moss between the stones. The castle is locked in a slow, silent, and eternal war with nature. It is a war fought not with swords and arrows, but with rainwater, wind, and seeds. And it is a war that the castle is slowly, inexorably losing. The most visible evidence of this slow defeat is the green tide that creeps relentlessly up the outer walls, the moss. From a distance, the green and gray streaks on the castle walls can seem picturesque, a romantic sign of age and permanence. But up close, you see it for what it is, a relentless, living force of decay. The British Isles provide the perfect climate for it. The air is almost always damp, and the rain is a frequent visitor. Every drop of water that clings to the rough surface of the stone is an invitation for a tiny moss spore to take root. It begins in the places where moisture lingers the longest, the shaded north-facing walls, the cracks and crevices in the mortar, the base of the walls where rainwater splashes up from the ground. At first, it is just a faint, greenish, velvety blush on the stone. But it is tenacious. Its tiny, thread-like rhizoids work their way into the smallest imperfections in the stone and mortar, seeking a foothold.
Once established, it grows. It forms thick, spongy cushions that trap even more moisture, creating a permanently damp microenvironment against the wall. This trapped damp is the castle's enemy. It accelerates the erosion of the stone. In winter, the water held in the moss freezes and expands, widening the cracks, dislodging the mortar, and slowly, patiently prying the castle apart molecule by molecule. You see it everywhere. It grows thick and lush in the joints between the cobblestones in the courtyard. It carpets the lower sections of the battlements, making them slick and treacherous. It finds a home on the slate or stone-tiled roofs, its growth helping to lift the tiles and allow water to seep into the precious roof timbers below. The fight against the moss is a futile one. Servants might be sent out with stiff brushes and scrapers to try and remove it from the lower walls, but they can never get it all. And as soon as they are done, the rain will come, and the spores will land, and the slow green reconquest will begin again.
The moss is a quiet, beautiful, and deeply sinister symbol of nature's power. It is a reminder that the castle, for all its apparent strength and permanence, is a temporary human imposition on the landscape. The natural world is constantly working to reclaim it, to pull it back down into the earth from which its stones were quarried. You look at the walls, streaked with 100 shades of green, gray, and black lichen. You see the small, delicate ferns that have taken root in a crack in the parapet. You see the ivy that is slowly, patiently working its way up the side of a tower. You are witnessing a siege, but it is a siege conducted on a geological timescale. The enemy is not an army of men. It is the soft, persistent, and ultimately invincible army of the moss.
The siege that never came. The entire existence of the castle is predicated on a single, terrifying event, the siege. Every feature of its design, the immense thickness of the walls, the towering height of the gatehouse, the moat, the drawbridge, the arrow slits, the battlements, is a carefully considered element in a strategy of defense. The castle is a weapon, a machine built for war. Its daily life, its routines, its very reason for being are all shaped by the anticipation of an attack. But for most castles, for most of the time, the siege never comes. The reality of castle life is not the high drama of a pitched battle, but the slow, grinding monotony of waiting for one. The year is a cycle of preparation for a threat that remains stubbornly on the horizon. In the spring, the moat is dredged of its winter sludge. In the summer, the stonemasons are employed to repair the cracks in the walls, replacing the stones loosened by the winter frosts. In the autumn, the storerooms are filled with provisions, sacks of grain, barrels of salted meat, casks of ale, enough to withstand a long encirclement.
The men-at-arms spend their days practicing for a war they may never fight. They train with the sword and the shield in the muddy courtyard. They practice archery, sending arrows thudding into straw targets. They maintain their armor, fighting a constant battle against the rust. They stand watch on the battlements, staring out at a peaceful landscape, their minds numb with boredom. The castle is a coiled spring, a state of permanent, tense readiness. But the tension dissipates over time, replaced by a deep, corrosive boredom. The days blend into one another, a repeating pattern of guard duty, training, and maintenance. The real enemies are not invading armies, but the more insidious foes of damp, rot, rust, and idleness. This state of perpetual, unfulfilled anticipation has a profound psychological effect on the castle's inhabitants. A sense of futility can set in. What is the point of all this preparation, this vigilance, if the enemy never appears? The soldiers grow restless, tempers fray. Minor disputes can escalate into brawls fueled by boredom and cheap ale.
The Lord might try to combat this by holding tournaments or hunts, but these are temporary distractions. The fundamental reality remains. The castle is a tool that is not being used. It is a place of immense potential energy that is never converted into kinetic action. And so, the great stone fortress, designed for the most intense and violent of human experiences, becomes a stage for the most mundane. The thick walls, built to repel siege engines, serve mainly to keep out the wind. The arrow slits, designed for killing, become nesting places for birds. The Great Hall, designed for war councils, is used for dull administrative tasks and smoky, lackluster feasts. The castle is a paradox. It is a place of extreme violence that is defined by profound peace. It is a place of high alert that is crippled by boredom. The weight of its own unfulfilled purpose is as heavy and oppressive as its stone walls. The siege that never came is the central, defining, and deeply anticlimactic fact of its existence.
The master's absence. A castle is a reflection of its lord. It is his seat of power, his primary residence, and the most potent symbol of his status. Its life, its rhythm, and its mood are all dictated by his presence. When the lord is at home, the castle is alive. The great hall is filled with his retinue of knights, clerks, and petitioners. There is a sense of purpose, of energy, of political and social life. But a medieval lord is an itinerant figure. He must travel constantly to attend the king's court, to visit his other manors, to wage war in a distant county. And when the lord is away, the castle feels hollow. His departure is a major event. A long train of horses, carts, servants, and men-at-arms assembles in the courtyard. There is a sense of bustle and importance. But once the last horse has passed through the gatehouse and the sound of the party has faded into the distance, a profound quiet settles over the castle. It is as if the fortress itself has exhaled, its central pillar removed. The castle is left in the care of a castellan, or constable, and a skeleton crew of guards and servants. The daily routines continue, but they lose their urgency and their meaning. The guards still patrol the walls, but their vigilance is relaxed. The cooks still prepare meals, but they are simpler, less elaborate affairs. The great hall, once the bustling center of power, falls silent and is often shut up to conserve firewood. A strange, listless torpor descends. The sense of purpose is gone. The castle is no longer the center of a political web. It is simply a large, empty, and expensive building to be maintained. The remaining inhabitants move through the halls like ghosts, their footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The days stretch out, long and uneventful. The absence of the master can be felt everywhere. The high table in the great hall stands empty, a stark reminder of the missing authority. The lord's private chambers are shuttered and locked. The kennels are quiet, the best hounds having gone with the lord on his journey.
For the servants, the lord's absence can be a mixed blessing. The workload is lighter, the pressure is less intense. But it can also be a time of uncertainty. Their lives and livelihoods are entirely dependent on the lord. His absence is a reminder of their precarious position. The dominant sound of the castle becomes the sound of the castle itself. The dripping of water in a damp corridor, the creak of a weather vane on a turret, the cooing of pigeons in the rafters, the wind moaning through the battlements. Without the human noise of the lord's court to mask them, the sounds of the castle's slow decay become more prominent. The castle feels like a body without a soul. It is a shell, a magnificent and imposing structure, but it is empty of the life and energy that gives it meaning. The days are marked only by the rising and setting of the sun and the changing of the guard. Everyone is in a state of waiting, waiting for news, waiting for instructions, waiting for the day when they will spot a column of horsemen on the horizon, signaling the return of the master, and the moment when the castle will once again be filled with noise, with life, and with purpose. Sleeping to the rain. Night falls. The last of the smoky rushlights has been extinguished. You lie in your small, cold chamber, wrapped in a damp wool blanket. The castle around you is a vast and complex architecture of sounds and silences. You hear the distant cough of a guard, the scratching of a rat in the wall, the mournful groan of the wind in the chimney. Your mind is a whirlwind of the day's anxieties, the small discomforts, the lingering chill in your bones. Sleep
feels like a distant country. And then it begins. A soft, gentle patter on the slate roof far above. It is the rain. At first it is hesitant, a few scattered drops. But then it finds its rhythm, growing into a steady, persistent drumming. It is a sound that seems to wash over the entire castle, to fill the vast empty spaces with its gentle, monotonous percussion. Unlike the other sounds of the night, the sudden creaks, the startling scratches, the rain is constant. It is a predictable, reliable, and deeply soothing sound. It masks the other more unsettling noises. The cough of the guard is lost in the downpour. The sound of the wind is transformed from a mournful howl into a gentle hiss.
The rain speaks of the world outside, of the wild, wet hills and the dark, empty fields. But it also reinforces the sense of shelter. You are inside, protected from the deluge by tons of solid stone. The rain on the roof is a barrier of sound between you and the wildness of the night. It is a lullaby sung by the elements themselves. You listen to its rhythms. You hear the way it changes as the wind gusts, driving it harder against the western walls. You hear the gurgle of the water as it begins to overflow from a stone gargoyle, creating a new, lower-pitched rhythm to add to the chorus. The sound is infinitely complex, yet profoundly simple. It is a sound that requires nothing of you. You do not need to analyze it, to fear it, to react to it. You can simply let it be.
As you lie there, listening to the steady, unceasing patter, you feel the anxieties of the day begin to dissolve. The worries about the damp, the cold, the endless chores, they are all washed away by the sheer, overwhelming presence of the rain. Your own small concerns seem insignificant in the face of this vast elemental concert. Your breathing begins to slow, to unconsciously match the steady rhythm of the rain. The tension in your shoulders begins to release. The castle, which so often feels like a cold, stone prison, is transformed by the sound into a sanctuary, a great hollow instrument being played by the weather. The rain is the one constant, the one reliable companion in the long, dark night. It was here long before the castle was built, and it will be here long after its last stone has crumbled into the earth. To sleep to the sound of the rain is to surrender to something ancient, powerful, and profoundly peaceful. It is the only sound in this hard, cold world that is constant enough and gentle enough to quiet the mind and finally to bring the gift of sleep.